Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrew Zwerling. I'm here with my partner, Marianne and Monroy, and it is our pleasure and privilege to conduct today's webinar, How to Become a Better Supervisor to Promote Employee Engagement and Reduce Risk. While people are still signing on, we see the numbers are growing, and to give everybody a chance to hear the substantive component of our program. I'll do what I do with all of these programs and just give a very brief introduction about our firm, about Marianne, and about myself. Garfunkel Wild, we've been around for over 45 years. We are a full-service healthcare law firm. By full service, I mean healthcare, litigation, finance, corporate, mental health, biotech, IP, and as reflected by today's webinar and the webinar series that Marianne and myself and our partners have been conducting all this year, employment law. In terms of our locations as a firm, we're in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Washington, D.C., and Florida. With regard to Marianne and myself, we have a growing number of decades between us in terms of our experience as litigation attorneys and employment lawyers. And because we play both roles, we deal with employment counseling on a day-to-day and trial attorneys and litigation attorneys. We're able to blend what we learn in litigation into our day-to-day counseling role and vice versa, as far as using our counseling role to inform how we litigate as well. In terms of the protocol for the presentation today, obviously we're not live. We don't have the same give and take ability if we see someone raising their hand to just take questions in real time. But you still can send us questions, if you're inclined to do so by sending them in the chat box, and we'll do our best to answer them as we go along. If we don't get a chance to answer one of your questions, simply reach out to us afterwards by email, by telephone. You have our contact information at the back end of the program, which will be available to you as well, if not today, probably likely by tomorrow. So what are the objectives? You see them bulleted out there. I don't have to read each and every one. It's really a program designed for pragmatism. We're not going to present and convey to you legalese, a lot of legal principles and so on. It's really to increase your awareness on how to problem solve on a day-to-day when things are playing out in front of you, rather than waiting until things fester and then we get the phone call. That's fine, but part of our role is to keep you out of trouble and keep the workplace as friendly and morale as high as possible as we can. So by imparting some of these thoughts to you during this presentation, we hope to achieve that role. We are keenly aware the legal profession is no different than any other industry or profession of increased pressures in the workplace due to labor shortages. And our hope is to take some of the edge off of that. You see that first bullet, strengthening your supervisory skills to promote a positive environment and minimize liability. Obviously, no one wants to get sued, whether individually as a supervisor or as an employer. So we're going to touch upon minimizing liability, but the emphasis really on the former, promoting a positive environment. We recognize the reality when you're dealing with a workplace issue, a personnel issue, you're not saying to yourself in that moment as you're talking to someone, I want to avoid a lawsuit. No, you want to solve the problem that exists in that moment, and to avoid the negative consequences in the workplace, to the best of your ability. And again, so finally, in moving forward and going through all of these issues, we don't like giving speeches. Obviously, this format is more susceptible to just Marianne talking and me talking. But again, ask questions as they arise.
But all right. Well, welcome everybody. Many of you I've had the pleasure to work with directly. So the first thing I want to talk about are some leadership pointers and pitfalls. A lot of these things, it is common sense, some of it, but it's worth repeating and emphasizing some real life examples that Andrew and I have repeatedly come across. And if you follow some of these pointers, we find that people stay out of the courtrooms, promote a positive work environment, and or are able to defend claims should they arise. As I said before, a lot of them are common sense, but I'll give some examples to go along. So being a role model. So if you're a manager or a supervisor, that's pretty obvious, but it's at every level of the organization, no matter what role you might be sitting in. Uh, Exemplifying good practice, performance, behaviors is important. Okay. And so if you are a manager or a supervisor, if you're anticipating or expecting your staff to engage in certain conduct, then you should model the same behavior. So for instance, during the COVID time and people were required to wear masks, the supervisors who didn't wear a mask, they weren't demonstrating being a role model, and it's hard to get people behind that. I also like to say, and it goes towards employee engagement, if you're going to have staff working late, working on a project, or involved with the project, lead by example, stay with the staff. I try never to have associates working late when it's a project that I'm involved with or supervising, right? If they're going to work late, I'm going to work late and pitch in. And that helps build the positive work environment, the employee engagement. Other types of examples are, maybe you're in a healthcare field and you're not supposed to have coffee in patient care areas or food or beverages. If you're the supervisor or manager who walks in with your Dunkin' Donuts, but reprimands everybody else for doing the same thing, it doesn't, it could be problematic. And believe me, employees write this stuff down. So when they're disciplined for things, they're going to point to their supervisor to say, well, they do the exact same thing. So why should I be disciplined for it? The next one is a pretty important bullet point, right? Obvious, demonstrate professional behavior and communications. Okay. But this is critical. And I know that people can be very busy, they're frustrated, they have deadlines. And sometimes you let your frustrations manifest themselves, right? And it could be the tone of voice, right? Sarcasm. It could be these are the more obvious ones, right? Fist pounding, foot stomping. You should never be throwing things, but we certainly get calls about that type of stuff. If you're like, could be a little bit quick to raise your voice, you have to rein that in if you're a supervisor or manager, because these are the types of things that undoubtedly will show up in lawsuit allegations. But even worse, it's going to permeate the work environment. So you want to make sure that you're not doing that. The other thing I like to tell people too, as far as communications, right? Don't be the supervisor or manager who just barks orders, right? Because you're not going to earn the respect of your employees. There's a way to ask people to do things, even though it's obvious they should be doing it. But the tone and the manner of asking, right? It could be something like, I know you have a lot on your plate and there's a lot to get done before year end, before the end of the week. However, it'd be really helpful if you can focus your attention on X, Y, and Z, right? You're going to get more buy-in. You're showing respect that they have a lot on their plate, but you're also doing it in a manner that's like, why haven't you done that? You can't, really refrain from those types of phrases. Just do it. Or I told you so, those kinds of things. They don't play well in the work environment.
And just to interject quickly, it also, if you use that raised voice or the angry tone, it can undermine your ability to get a job done. We just had a case in the last 2 weeks where the supervisor was dealing with an underperforming team. And the objective of the meeting was to talk about the underperformance and come up with some prescriptions to make things run better. And the supervisor lost his temper, raised his voice in ways that on an objective level would be deemed excessive. And all of a sudden, afterwards, a bunch of the underperformers complained about his performance, about his raised voice, how it created a hostile work environment. And all of a sudden, the conversation shifted from, wait, they're underperforming. We need to fix that, to, hey, how's that supervisor doing? So not only are you handing to those who may want to abuse the situation, certain underperformers, a gift, right? Taking the attention off of them on an objective level, it hurts your ability to get your job done.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, the next bullet point is be engaged. Andrew and I do plenty of programs on employee engagement. But I just want to give you some of the highlights there. Employee engagement is critical. People spend a lot of time recruiting, investing in, getting staff. Sometimes if you're using an outsourcing recruiting, that you want people to be happy where they're working and showing that you're invested in them, okay? So it's important, you know, people by name. You might be a large organization, but it's take the time to know those that you work with, maybe if you don't work with them often, but it shows a lot. You want to earn the respect of the people that you're working for, because they will then put in the extra time, right? So if they see you're interested in their growth, their development, you're going to have a team that's more willing to put that extra effort in than, what do they call it, the quiet quitting. I'm just going to do the bare minimum to meet the job requirements, but I'm not going to put above and beyond, right? So you really want to do that. You want to show that you're giving guidance. I always say, don't keep yourself like locked behind closed doors. Circulate around the office. Let people know you're there to help. Give the guidance. Show that you're invested in your team, invested in your staff, because the output you put in, you know, will translate to, you know, the input that you get from your team, acknowledging their accomplishments. Because when you overlook the employee engagement, it tends to breed a toxic work environment. It can ruin the reputation. People aren't going to want to work for your office. I mean, I certainly know law firms I would never want to work for because their reputation is out there. And that's something you want to stop from happening. And let's face it, the distraction on HR or on human resources, your resources in addressing employee issues, you know, is minimized when you're more involved with your team. All right. So the next one is about gossip, water cooler conversations. Many people want to be friends, right? Best friends with the people or the team that they're working with. And I can't caution you enough about some boundaries. You want to have collegial atmosphere. You want to be friendly, but you don't want to get involved with the water cooler conversations. It really, time and time again, it's problematic because you might think that, oh, cone of silence, I'm going to tell Andy, my friend, right? Stuff about another person's divorce or that they're going through therapy or whatever it might be, right? Now, maybe Andrew will keep my confidence, maybe he won't, right? And that will just undermine your authority and respect as a supervisor or manager. And frankly, if you see that kind of stuff going on, the gossip, you really should intervene to tamp that down. And there's different ways to go about doing that. Respect employee privacy. Do not pry into people's personal lives. You know, if somebody comes and says they have a health condition, right? You're going to refer them to HR, maybe the EAP program. There might be any reasonable accommodations, but you're not going to drive them to their doctor's appointment. And trust me, this happened, right? We've had it happen. And you're sitting in there and you're finding out every single health condition the person has. And then down the road, there's a legitimate business reason to part ways, but the employee's going to say potentially, right? Well, you knew I had this health condition and you're terminating me because of it, and it's retaliatory, whatever it might be. Again, know the boundaries and respect employee privacy. Be careful about offhanded remarks, even if you're saying it sarcastically or without meaning, such as, oh, so-and-so must be off their meds, right? Or things like that. That can turn into claims where people are just making flippant remarks. Maybe they're in jest, maybe they mean nothing by it, they're not intentional, but time and time again, we see problems with that kind of stuff. Don't make comments about people's marital status or their kids. These can be all protected categories. They have kids, they don't have kids. You know, stay away from those inquiries or statements. Another key, and we're putting down the big ticket items that we see come up in claims. Don't make promises without authority, right? You may be the supervisor of a particular department, and it's perfectly reasonable for you may say, all right, this person wants to leave early on Fridays, or maybe start their shift a half an hour early. And leave a half an hour early, right? And seems okay from an operational standpoint. However, if you haven't checked with maybe your supervisors or with HR, you may not have the full picture. 3 other people could have asked for that same privilege and it was denied, but yet you promised it to somebody else and it could be perceived as discriminatory, unfair, disparate treatment. So you want to have all the facts. The other thing is, be careful about making excuses or giving promises because let's say one person says, well, I need to leave early because it's for childcare reasons. And it's perfectly acceptable in concept, right? And you may want to grant that. But what about if somebody else recently asked because they needed to take care of an aged parent, right? But you said, no, you can't pick and choose whose excuse is or whose reason is better than someone else's, and you can run into problems. So you want to have the big picture. Enlist HR if you have an HR department or maybe a department heads, and make sure you're dealing with the full picture. Encourage employees to seek assistance. Years ago, there was much more of a sink or swim mentality, right? Employees either could hit the ground running or, could lose their job. I really encourage people, supervisors and employers, to spend some time training, giving guidance, and not automatically throw up your hands and say, forget it. Because first of all, when there's a lot of turnover in an office, it signals to people this isn't a great place to work, okay? And if you don't give people the tools and the instruction, right, you're not engaging with your staff. Again, all those things we talked about for employee engagement. You want to give them the tools to succeed. But also, if you wind up terminating, if you have a record of the guidance you gave, maybe one-on-one meetings, counselings, right? If they challenge that termination, you could say, oh, no, I really invested time and effort. And only after, spending that time, did I then decide, look, it just wasn't working out. So you're doing the employee a benefit and helping them potentially succeed, but also yourself as a supervisor and the company. And last, consistently imply and enforce policies and benefits. And this one is tough. It's obvious again, but sometimes tough for people to apply because people may say, well, I have a superstar nurse or I have a superstar biller, and they come in late every day. Maybe it's 15 minutes, but because they're so great when they're here, I never write them up. But you have somebody else who's like average, they walk in late 5 minutes and you got the pad of paper out and you're writing them up right away. That is going to lead to a disparate treatment type of claim. And again, it doesn't take much for an employee to say, well, it's because I fit into this protected category. And you don't want to put yourself unnecessarily on the defense. So really make sure that you're applying those policies in the same manner. You can't say, well, I'll give this person more PTO than the other person, right? You have to follow those policies. Even if you may have a legitimate reason or you think you're rewarding someone, you're setting up for a bigger problem.
This topic, it's, we touched upon it briefly just before, but it's worth stressing. It's just a critical importance. Retention issues have never been more prevalent, and employees, when they come to work, the employees one would care about anyway, they expect to be valued. They want to know that their career development is on your to-do list as well. And a way to achieve that objective of engaging them and letting them know that they count and they're valued is how you talk with them. It's not necessarily what you say as a leader, but how you deliver the message. It's not the lyrics, it's the melody, it's how you say something. So for example, engaged listening, are you talking to somebody when they come to you, or responding, I should say, or listening, so to speak, when they're coming to you with a problem and you're going, no, I hear you. What are you saying, right? Are you texting, are you checking your emails or text? The clear message there, right? Shouldn't have to spell it out, but it's worth spelling out because that phone issue is a common one that comes up in the workplace. And look at people when they talk to you. Put the phone down for the few seconds or few minutes when they're coming to you with an issue, with a problem that they need assistance on, okay? Nonverbal communication. Are you rolling your eyes? If they're talking to you, are you looking over their shoulder at something going on down the hall? Engage means engage. It doesn't mean listen with half an ear. Manage stress in the moment. Anybody no, I don't care who the person is and what their personality is and temperament is. We all get stressed. We all want to just explode at times, but we shouldn't. I was going to say we can. Obviously, anyone can explode, but we shouldn't. And so when your temperature is rising, do what you need to do to manage it. Maybe it's go, for a walk outside or walk down the hall, get a glass of water, whatever it takes, because you want to connect with whoever that employee is, and you're not going to be able to do it if you yourself are running hot or getting triggered. Always assert yourself in a respectful and constructive manner. Uh, Again, these should be obvious points, but if they were so obvious, then Marianne and I would have a lot more free time on our hands. So what's your objective as a leader? We have these webinars and we do the trainings and we problem solve on a day-to-day. We talk about document and have this talk with an underperformer and document. Yeah, that's great. If there's a litigation, we want, one of the first things we ask for is a personnel file. Did you document? But keep in mind, what's the point of the interaction in the first place? It's not to, set someone up for a termination. It's not to be able to defend yourself in a lawsuit. You really want to give them a prescription on how to succeed. You want every one of your subordinates to do a good job and stick around for as long as possible, and then for as long as they're providing a value to your workplace. So the threshold priority is, how do I give them, I have to tell them what they're doing wrong in a way that keeps their confidence, in place, and also give them a prescription going forward on how to fix the problem. Simply telling somebody, you know what, you're making mistakes, you're screwing up, you're underperforming, and then documenting, spoke to Zwerling about underperforming. So if I get sued, I can say, spoke to him about it. You want to tell them how to do the job right. And so you want to be a mentor. You want to be a teacher. I don't mean in some hokey way. In the workplace, you're a supervisor because you know how to do the job that they're being tasked to do. And so you know how to do it better than them. Share some of that knowledge and deliver it in a way that they hear you rather than shut down.
Look, and we recognize that it's hard sometimes. You have a lot of deadlines and a lot of pressing. I mean, I'll give Andy some kudos. So he is one of the best teachers in our office. And he gives the associates, even the partners, right, time and undivided time to teach us how to do things over the years. I've worked with Andy over 20 years. And while it takes a lot of time, you'll get a lot out of it if you put that upfront work into it. And recognize people are going to be hired with different skill sets. They might say something on a resume, but assume you're going to have to put some of that time in to get them to where you want.
Okay, so some quick tidbits on engaged listening. Don't discipline or issue criticism with an audience. We've all seen that being done. The only takeaway the target is going to have is, you just embarrassed me. You didn't have to say this in front of my peers. You could have taken me into your office, given me the admonition, whatever the message is going to be. Doing it in front of an audience only has one impact, and it's a negative one. It's okay to acknowledge your own wrongdoing. Well, we're not perfect as supervisors. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to forget to respond to an email, etc. It's okay to acknowledge it because it's real, and you also establish a certain credibility that you're not, telling them, hey, look, I'm great. I don't make mistakes. I'm holding you to the same fake standard. 24-hour rule. It's not a literal rule. It's just whatever it takes for your temperature, to die down before you engage in problem solving. Attack the issue, not the person, right? Don't say my 5-year-old could have done a better job. What's the point, right? You're just going to make them feel poorly about themselves. Certainly create a tension line, if not some animus towards you. Focus on what they did wrong or what they should have done. All right. Don't be defensive about pointing out their performance flaws. At the end of the day, we're all accountable as supervisors and as subordinates. So focus on what the problem is. And again, strengthening your listening skills. Listen for what's said, but also what is unsaid. As Marianne said, I would say we take pride in walking around and talking to our colleagues and subordinates and so on. It's just, in one way, how we're hardwired, and one of the reasons we like our workplace. But we also know the people we work with.
Mhm.
So if Marianne sees me coming in the morning and she says, good morning, Andy, and I go, good morning, right? She's gonna know something's up, right? Look for the nonverbal cues for your subordinates. You're gonna miss some, and you're not gonna know everybody the same way, of course. But again, focus on the individual, not your phone, not something down the hall. Listen to what they say and just also try and read them. Not to pry into their private business so much as just to make sure that, they're in the right place with regard to the work that they have to do.
Right, because sometimes it could be that they're overwhelmed, have 15 things on their plate, and they don't know how to prioritize what needs to be done. And if you can pick up that nonverbal cue that they're upset or whatever, and then you say to them, "Can I help you?" They might then be, disclose to you, "Okay, I have 15 things due for 4 different people, and I don't know how to manage this," right? And then you could step in and help prioritize.
And just a quick distinction between a landscape that you shouldn't walk on and should walk on. You ask somebody, hey, is everything all right? And they go, I'm going through this really horrible divorce, right? You don't want to pry into that, right? I mean, you did ask them a question, they gave you an answer. You don't, oh, it is, what's it about? No, no, don't go there. Your response should be, hey, if it's, affecting your job in any way, and if you need some assistance in getting the job done, let's talk about
Right.
the job, not about the divorce, okay? So you're acknowledging that it may be a distraction without prying and letting them know that, like any situation that a person may have that affects their ability to be present and work in a productive manner, letting them know that you're going to be supportive in the workplace to the extent practicable.
Right, and if they raise something like, I have a medical issue, you're not going to pry about the medical issue, but you may, and rightfully say, well, I suggest, well, if you need any type of accommodation, please contact HR.
Yeah.
And they can walk through that process and also maybe point you to an EAP program should you need any of those things. All right. Okay, issue of confidentiality. So I'm just going to say up front, there's no off the record discussion. So anyone who comes into you and says, can I just tell you something? But can we talk off the record, right? You can't promise that, right? Because certain things, discrimination, safety issues, harassment issues, OSHA issues, injuries, right? You have to tell them, look, I will keep it as confidential as practical or as possible, but depending on what you tell me, I really would want to be able to, I have to be able to address it. You encourage them. You say, look, obviously you're upset about something. I encourage you to tell me, only then can I help you. You're unhappy about something, you got to give me some information to work on, to help it resolve the issue. 9 times out of 10, they will disclose what the issue is, and then you have to take that information and act upon it, right? So you can't just then say, oh, it's nothing, they're complaining about so and so, but yeah, it's really, there's nothing to it. That's not good enough. I'm telling you, too many times, 6 months later, they're going to say, well, I raised this complaint or concern and so did nothing about it. And it's not going to be good enough for the supervisor to say, well, I knew they were just upset about whatever, it really had no merit to. Well, did you talk to anybody? Did you investigate anything? And I'm not talking about, it has to always be a full-fledged investigation. It could be a couple of informal conversations, but you rooted out what the problem was and confirmed that there was nothing unlawful happening, and or you addressed it going forward to resolve the issue. So really make sure you're doing that and document. It could be an email, it could be a note to a file. If it's a discrimination issue, it's going to be a more entailed investigation and documentation. And then when you are investigating people, as far as confidentiality, you can tell employees for purposes of the investigation that they should keep your conversation confidential and not talk to other people about it to protect the investigation. However, by certain laws, the National Labor Relations Act, after the investigation is over, you can't actually prohibit people from talking about things, workplace safety issues, discrimination. There are prohibitions against that. Okay. I'm only talk about these for a minute or two here. There are certain behaviors in the office that we always say, look, you got to get a handle on. take care of them sooner than later because it really can have a huge impact. So you have inappropriate and disruptive behaviors, and they're on the same spectrum, they just ratchet it up, right? So inappropriate behavior, unwarranted, reasonably interpreted to be demeaning or offensive. It doesn't even have to be unlawful, right? It could be someone who's just irritating, annoying, and it's detrimental on the relationships in the office. It could be belittling statements, maybe some condescending language, failure to cooperate or do tasks that a person is asked to do, things of that nature. Okay, or maybe you're asking them to do things that are unrelated to their job, right? Like I can't have my assistant schedule my kids' soccer stuff on my calendar, right? That's unrelated to my assistant's job. So that could be just inappropriate. And then the next level up, go in the right direction here, would be more disruptive, all inappropriate, but at a higher level, right? Physically threatening language, maybe you're throwing things, anger outbursts, profane language, demeaning individuals, if you're healthcare, patients, things like that. And that really has a huge impact on the workplace. And you're going to wind up seeing that these types of behaviors, right, sometimes they're caused by historical tolerance, right? Oh, so-and-so's been like that forever. He or she is old school, right? You can't tolerate that behavior going forward, right? It could be due to individual factors like personal problems. Maybe somebody is going through a messy divorce, and so they're short with people. They raise their voice, right? You still have to address that. Just because they're going through some terrible personal things doesn't mean that they're at liberty to attack coworkers or subordinate employees. You have to address that behavior. There could be systematic issues. So for instance, maybe the workload is just over the top, and so people are just stressed and they're being, short and frustrated. Again, you still have to address it and figure out a workaround to get people engaging in appropriate professional behaviors in the workplace. And that's important because when these things get out of control, there's an increase in claims and litigation. Okay. It causes more productivity. And what happens when lower productivity or people leave? There's more work to do, more stress, more frustration. It's like almost, what do you call
Vicious cycle.
a vicious cycle, that's right. And so your best bet is to get in front of it before it gets to the point of no return, right? You don't want to be that supervisor that no one wants to work for because you've had 15 people quit on you in a month of staying, right? Diminishes your reputation, it diminishes the reputation of the business as a positive work environment, right? And if you're in healthcare, which many of our clients and people are listening to, it can cause some serious adverse quality of care issues. I'll let Andy tell a story about if you.
I just had one case involving an anesthesiologist who was pretty poor at intubating patients. The very short version of a much longer story is 2 patients died as a result of his conduct. And one of the patients who died, he was actually being monitored because of his performance. There was a monitor 15 feet away, and nobody ran for help because they were so afraid of this physician's temper and his outbursts and so on. So they all froze in the moment to the obvious detriment to that patient. So it can be serious. Obviously, that's an extreme example, but even on a day-to-day, people will check out on you, if not leave, if you allow this behavior to go unchecked.
Right. Next topic, documentation.
Okay, why is it important? You have all the bullets there. Obviously, it's a defense litigation tool. If you get sued, it's great to have documentation showing that contemporaneously with the incident or event or discussion, you wrote stuff down. We like it as litigators. It's been our best friend or worst enemy, depending. It's good for investigations to have paper to use as a springboard for how you're going to investigate, and so on. It records employee performance. The last bullet's critical because you have all this different paper that any workplace generates. It could be handbooks, it could be policies, it could be evaluation forms. And really, what does that do? It tells the employee, this is what's expected of you. and this is what you need to achieve. This is how you're supposed to behave. And for the employee who is well-intentioned and as cynical as we are, most of them are. They come to work to try and do a good job. That's helpful. They want to know what the guardrails are. They want to know, what the metrics may be that's expected of them. And if you don't give them clarity on that, and they run afoul of what you perceive to be the guardrails or what the objectives are, you're going to have a disconnect when you sit down with them. They're going to say, I didn't know I needed to do that. I didn't know I needed to refrain from doing that. The documentation, if you have an interaction with an employee, discussion about performance, using that as an example, document it. And the documentation could be a simple email. Spoke to Zwerling about repeated instances of tardiness, an email to file, right? It doesn't have to be a treatise. People will forget conversations. And you see it on TV, you see it in movies, we see it in our day-to-day work lives, where we'll say, well, did you document X? No, but we spoke about it. Or, why didn't you have a written agreement? Well, because we were getting along. Well, but you don't always get along, and that's why you need a piece of paper. With regard to the performance issues, did you document them? No, but I did speak to the person 5 times. Well, that's nice. When there's a litigation, they're going to deny you said anything and come up with a completely different conversation. Marianne and I have even had cases where people created fake journals about workplace issues, the impact of their supervisor's poor behavior on them, total fakery. Okay, so document them. It'll be your best friend, and it's never too late to document. We'll have those instances where we'll say, well, this has been going on for 6 months. Did you document? No, we didn't. Okay, fine. So here's what you do. One, you document now, today, what happened in the last 6 months. Not as good, obviously. Then have a conversation with the employee now, walk through each one of the bullets in your new documentation, then create a second documentation saying, spoke with Zwerling on October 22nd about the above issues, right? Boom, it's never too late. Don't say, well, I didn't do it for 6 months. Why am I going to bother now? Trust me, we want it done. It'll help you out in your interactions with the employee. It'll help us out should things go south. Right. Performance evaluations can be a tool or a sword. Okay. What are the evaluations used for? Expectations, giving feedback, how you're doing. If you have clear metrics for that particular job, you can say, hey, you met them, you exceeded them, or you fell short. It's letting the employee know that what was expected of them was achieved or not achieved. Okay. When we say it could be a tool or a sword, a lot of these evaluations, they'll have, numerical, attitude, 1 to 5, 5, 3, 4, whatever the numbers are. Don't rubber stamp those numbers. It's the worst thing you can do. One, you're not telling the employee what they're doing well, so they feel good about themselves, or what they're doing poorly, so they can fix the problem with your guidance. But a bit worse, we've had too many litigations or arbitrations to count where someone gets terminated and their lawyer shows up with a stack of evaluations where the person got a 10. In fact, that example I gave you, the anesthesiologist, that became a litigation. The evaluations, 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10, right? His employee tried to make use of that. Fortunately, the other facts are just, so, supported by the evidence and so egregious that the trier of fact just said, we don't care what the rubber stamped evaluation said. But you don't want to be in that place, because that employee, if you sit down with them to discipline them, they're going to say, wait a second, you're telling me that now, but look at my evaluation for the last year or for the last couple of years. Okay. So be honest in those, in putting in those numbers. The comments section is usually most critical. If someone's underperforming in some way, spell it out. Don't try and be their best friend, when you're sitting down with them. It's not going to help them long term. We've had those situations too, where as supervisors in our professional lives, we've been, part of a termination of somebody, and we'll say, well, your supervisors, they told you that, you might be terminated if you didn't fix X. And they'll say, no, they never said that. They never told me it was that bad. Okay, they said, "Oh, this is serious," or "You really need to improve," but they never said, I'm at the edge of a cliff and I may lose my job." So with the performance evaluations, be objective, be clear about where an employee stands. The performance evaluation ultimately is going to support disciplinary measures if things don't improve. So you want clarity and honesty in giving that feedback, both verbal and written. I mean, there should be a correlation between the two. Motivates improvement in productivity. Even the worst performer, no one's going to walk out of any evaluation, feeling good. If someone's telling me you're a 2 out of 10, obviously they're going to say, "Wow, I'm really doing poorly." But you want them to at least walk out saying, "My supervisor has my back. My supervisor is trying to help me improve," rather than the other. "My supervisor set me up for a termination." Okay. Again, so that goes to the lyrics, excuse me, the melody, not the lyrics. The lyrics count also. You want them walking out of this and knowing exactly what it is that they need to remedy.
And if I could just add in these performance evals, if this person is really on an edge of a cliff and you think that, down the road, you may be looking at a termination, give a few examples in there, like those generalized terms. Well, their error rate is high. Like, give some example, right? I reviewed a week of billing entries, whatever it might be, and they were 15 errors. Or their attendance out of the last month, and I've seen this, right? In the last 3 months, they were unexcused absences of 15, right? Put a few examples that are not just these conclusory, like they're disrespectful when they talk, right? Mention an incident. You don't have to go through detail, but something. Okay. Which leads us into, outside of the performance eval, just documenting performance issues in general. And you had already said it doesn't have to be something very formal. Sometimes it's as easy as, look, an email. You've been late a couple of times this week. We need you to improve your attendance and be here ready to start the day as scheduled, right? If they keep on doing it, then you're going to write up something a little bit more formal. And you'll deal with that. A simple email could suffice, right? So it could be like, you've been late a couple of days or whatever it might be. I also encourage clients all the time that they're talking to me, we're going to make a termination. We have 15 reasons why we're going to terminate this employee, but we're not going to do it for a week or two because somebody's on vacation. Send an email internally, right? So maybe you tell the CEO or HR, say, okay, based upon our discussion, we are going to move forward with the termination or separation of employee X. We're going to do it on this date because of vacation schedules or the person is out or whatever it might be. That could be a blessing in disguise, because if the employee may, right? Some realize the writing is on the wall. I can't tell you how many times they'll come in and you were going to terminate them, didn't get around to it, but now they need family leave, or their big toe got stubbed and they need to go to the hospital, or
Yeah,
whatever it
we
might be.
had a couple where the timing was freaky. We had one where the head of HR on a Friday morning wrote an email to the HR team and the supervisor. "We will be terminating Smith on Monday." Well, guess what? Smith got wind of it, and Saturday night sends in, "I'm going out on disability," FMLA notice. The person was fired anyway, and it went away because there was the email saying we were going to fire them before we knew about the FMLA. We had another one where on a Thursday, they said, "We're going to terminate so-and-so on Monday." When the person came in for the termination meeting, they said, "Hey, I'm pregnant." Okay. They went ahead with the termination because they had already decided to do it before they knew that she was pregnant. So document your intention. Critical.
And also, one of the bullets there is document only facts, right? Facts are key. Clients sometimes call me up and they say, this person is out all the time. I want to terminate them. I'm like, okay, show me the attendance records. And not that they were lying to me, they genuinely, feel that the person's always out. But when you look at the attendance records, it could be they were on a protected leave of absence, or they called out sick, and that's protected leave maybe it's under the city leave statute, right? And when you drill down, it's like, oh, maybe there weren't so many, unexcused absences there. And it wasn't an intentional thing. It was a real impact on the work environment, but you have to look at the information before you jump to that conclusion. And then as far as documenting too, I'm thinking of one thing, it was charting, right? It was a doctor who was so behind in charting and also had 97 patient complaints, literally a ton of patient complaints. But no one got around to telling this doctor that there were, 20 patient complaints in short duration, right? Recently. And needless to say, the doctor comes in and says, I'm pregnant. But now the employer, though, is ready with the last complaint to say, I'm done. We're going to get rid of this person. It's going to look contrived because if you didn't terminate that person for the 20 complaints that came in recent history, but now you want to do it the moment they say they're pregnant, it's a problem. So be on top of those types of things. Now, so the warning notice, and I won't stay on this too long, keep them short and concise, right? We don't need a 10-page warning notice or performance improvement plan. If they violated a policy or a rule or whatever it is, indicate what the problem is, indicate the nature of the incident. What's the nature? What's the policy that got violated? Keep it in simple terms, not inflammatory. It's not like shouldn't say it's a rookie mistake. It should be, person didn't, had 15 errors in a document, failed to proofread, whatever it might be. What's the corrective action? What's the plan? And it might be, we're going to have weekly one-on-ones, you're going to improve your error rate, you're going to, whatever it might be, engage in, I put this in all the time, engage in consistent and appropriate, respectful communications with team members, promote a positive, that type of thing. And then the next time they curse somebody out, you have this document that says, we already warned you about this, you can't do it. And indicate, as Andrew said, what's the consequence, right? Is it, maybe you have a lockstep, it's a first warning, second warning, whatever, suspension. Maybe it's, we can go directly to, to start or whatever the word is, where you can terminate based upon it, but let the employee know what are the potential consequences. And it could be a contract. If a contract's involved, that disciplinary notice should cross-reference it. So it could say it's a violation of section such and such of your contract that requires you to do whatever. And then non-compliance, I think I just said that, the consequences for that. All right, I'm gonna move on. Oh, one other point I just remembered. Let's say you have to sit down in that exit meeting, that termination meeting. I know many employees are at will. You can terminate them for no reason or any reason at all. And so some of our clients feel like I don't have to give them a reason. They're at will. I'm just going to tell them they're not suited for the job and terminate them. And what inevitably happens is they will get a lawyer's letter that said, you terminated me. There was no reason given. So it must be because I am this color, this ethnicity, this gender, whatever it might be. Give some sense. People are terminated for a reason. There's always a reason. You don't have to get into a ton of detail, but let them know it's performance, a particular incident, whatever it is. You're best served by saying something rather than nothing. Okay.
All right, harassment factors to consider. We're not going to go into harassment, sexual harassment. You can spend days on that. It's really just to bullet through. As a supervisor, if something's taking place in front of you, what do you do? So what is unlawful versus inappropriate? Even when we give the harassment, sexual harassment trainings, we say, don't memorize the definition of harassment and sexual harassment. If it's wrongful behavior, who cares if it's a violation of the law? You still have to act as a supervisor. Who can be a victim? Who could be a harasser? Flip sides of the same coin. Anybody. Right? If someone's in your workplace, they can be a victim. If somebody is in your workplace, they can be a harasser, regardless of what their title. So you shouldn't be there thinking to yourself as a supervisor, oh, I don't like that behavior, but it's a vendor. I can't do anything about it. Or I know they're picking on that person in the waiting area, but they're not one of my employees, or subordinates. I can't do anything. Again, it should just be right in your head. It's a bad behavior. who cares who the victim is as far as title? Who cares who the harasser is? Gender is irrelevant, etc. Moving on to the next slide, so we don't belabor too much. Who cares if the person says they were joking? Oh, it's to go back to Marianne's, it's historical. Bill has always been like that. He's been here 25 years. He always uses the same joke. If the joke shouldn't be tolerated, who cares that it's been around for 25 years? Okay, keep that in mind, as a supervisor. The past is just that. It's the past. It's not the present. And that's what we have to deal with. In terms of some specifics, these are big ones that we dealt with. Hugging, no one's saying that you have to prohibit hugging in the workplace, but if you hold that hug too long or too close, it could be problematic. Or if you only hug your favorites when they have a big event. Oh, you bought a house and you give your favorite a hug, but the other members of your team, you don't hug that. And all of a sudden, they misperceive that as well. That's because I am fill in the blank in terms of some membership in a protected class. So hugging, you can do it, but recognize depending upon who you hug, how you hug, it can create some risk. And if you're a supervisor watching this situation play out, be mindful of the too close, too long, or, selective hugging issues in terms of whether or not you should intervene. Standing in close quarters, Marianne and I are very careful about how close we stand next to people. Our legal assistants, if they have to come into our room and sit in that chair, we give them, we don't stay in that chairs and have them reach over us. We get up, we let them sit. It's a courtesy thing, if nothing else. But again, it can be risky behavior if you invade the personal space of someone who doesn't like that. Or if somebody's looking at it from a distance, maybe your colleague, immediate colleague or subordinate is okay with it, but someone else is watching and going, man, that just looks bad. Like, I can't believe so-and-so is that close, right? You want to avoid that. It doesn't mean you have to walk around with your head on a swivel about everything you do, but just be mindful of how close you're standing to somebody. Calling someone honey or sweetheart or sweetie. I mean, that stuff from the Stone Ages, that kind of talk shouldn't come out of anybody's mouth. You're in a workplace, professionalism is the driving force, right? So again, someone will say, oh, that's old school, he or she, but it's typically a he, is going to use they're just being polite. No, it's just wrong. And so if you hear that as a supervisor, that kind of language coming out of someone's mouth, step in and tell them, no, that's your colleague, or that's a client, or that's a patient. We don't talk that way.
Right, and we are coming to a close real soon, but a couple of things we just want to caution people. It's not just what happens in the workplace, it's also outside of the workplace. So if you're at any work-related event or even non-work related event, you go with a bunch of colleagues to the bar, a happy hour, right? You can't let your guard down. There's no grabbing or groping and say, well, it's off hours, it's okay. It's not okay. You're going to wear your manager hat. And in fact, employees at all levels, right? They're not going to come in the next day and say, oh, we're going to forget about what happened at the bar last night. Be careful at holiday parties. Be careful with places that serve alcohol. People, sometimes the most conservative, respectful people can't hold their liquor, or they drink a little too much wine, and then there's some touchy-feely invasion of personal space. Happens a lot at holiday parties, sporting events, hotels that might be in business conferences, right? Stay out of people's hotel rooms. I say this all the time. You got to meet for business related reasons, meet in the lobby, the business center, or the restaurant, because you're opening yourself up for accusations if you're, sitting on the hotel bed or even the desk in somebody's particular room. As far as electronic devices, there's no expectation of privacy. If people say that there were inappropriate communications via a phone or whatever, emails, we can download and get that information. You can press delete all you want. We can get forensics to pull that stuff up. I will tell people, be very careful about how you communicate with phones, particularly text messages, all right? You might think you're being funny or sarcastic. People may view it as curt or disrespectful. All caps is now a sign of you're yelling at me, right? Someone recently told me, I guess generation, whatever, where we're in right now, I forgot. Apparently, if you use punctuation, that's passive aggressive. I didn't know that. I put periods in my text. So I was given the example, if I say it's fine, right, and I don't put a period, it really is fun. If I put fine and a period, I'm apparently being obnoxious. So I'm not saying you need to go that crazy, but be mindful of what you're putting down in these messages. Everything that applies in the workplace or applies remotely. I think we have a slide at the end for remote work. We can avoid that, but what I'm just saying is you don't get to show up on a remote screen in your pajamas or in bed. Everything applies remotely that would in the office. Is this me too?
Yeah.
So reporting harassment, if an employee doesn't put the complaint in writing, it still counts. If they reported it verbally and they told it to a supervisor or to another colleague, and the colleague reports it to the supervisor, you must act upon it. You don't need to wait till they put it down in writing, and you can't wait for that. Supervisors who know of potential harassment must act upon it, and they could be held personally liable under various statutes. So you cannot ignore the situation. You can't, jump to a conclusion that harassment didn't occur prior to doing some form of an investigation. Facilities employees, they do take complaints very seriously and promptly address them. That's what we recommend to our clients. And if you haven't, hopefully you've heard the term retaliation, but no employer and or supervisor can retaliate against an employee who makes a complaint or participates in investigation. It also applies to supporting employees. So you report a complaint about your colleague or coworker, same level, and that coworker starts giving you a harder time because you reported them. That's retaliatory action that they can be disciplined for too. So don't ignore that.
The general overlay is the one that we started with in this section in terms of, it doesn't matter if it's unlawful, if it's inappropriate for the workplace. And the workplace, as Marianne pointed out, could be at an offsite conference, it could be offsite. It's just an extension of the workplace. And this is the little mantra that we advise people to engage in when they're not sure whether their behavior is wrong or right, whether they should do it or not. But even as a supervisor, if you see something going on, you can use this same mantra. Would you yourself, do or say that in front of your significant other or your boss or a newspaper reporter? If you answer any one of those questions no, then you should step in as a supervisor if you see it taking place in front of you.
Yeah, I just saw somebody ask a question if the slides are available. My understanding is that we post this recording with the slides. It might be on LinkedIn, but you'll be able to get access to
Yeah, they
them.
will be available. Yep. And then this last slide here, we're not going to go into it. We're cognizant of the time. It's really to stress that there should be a real tight-knit relationship between HR and supervisors, because there's that understandable tension line on a certain level. Some employee or subordinate is out on leave, they've exhausted all their leave, and the supervisor is going, I need so-and-so back for my team. My team's underwater. I need that extra body. And if they don't have any more leave left, fire them. And HR is saying, well, they may not have any form of leave left, but they have a disability. We still have to engage in what's known as an interactive dialogue to see if there's a reasonable accommodation that would enable them to keep working, which may include giving them unpaid leave. Okay. It's a process that you must go through. If you don't, you can pay some heavy price for it as an employer, as a supervisor in terms of litigation. Okay. But it requires some keen coordination. We were dealing with one lengthy multi-hour one yesterday where we had HR and the supervisors in the same meeting, because the supervisors were explaining why an accommodation was doable, not doable, was workable, not undue hardship, not undue hardship, because you're acting in good faith to try and make it work. But it's really, again, to stress, HR is going to be your best friend in navigating those situations. HR is not just playing it safe. HR is trying to watch your back and that of the employer.
Yeah. So before we end, I do see somebody had a question. I apologize, I didn't see it in the chat, about addressing if there were any pointers. If a supervisor is tasked with supervising, if I'm understanding the question right, another colleague's staff. So I have seen this come up where there's a change where someone shifts from one department to another. They do things a little bit differently. It can make employees testy or angry. Well, so-and-so never required this. So there's no magic to that other than getting on the same page, I would say, with the team at the get-go, right? Showing that respect, being professional, maybe getting the input from this team that you're now going to be supervising, right? Have a little team meeting and say, look, I know you were previously supervised by so-and-so, and I'm sure they had their ways of doing things. I'm hoping that you will give me some latitude to make some changes. I think they're going to improve the office or improve operations. I'd like to give those things a try. We could talk about feedback and see how things play out. Again, this is that engagement piece. So before you're pulling the rug out from under them and changing everything from soup to nuts, right? You would get some of the buy-in up front. And sometimes it's a slow process, right? Like, don't implement everything at one time, right? So some of that, I'm going to bring up the example of return to work, right? Maybe you've been fully remote. Before you go to immediately, let's drag everybody in 5 days a week, you might ease people into it and say, we're going to go back 3 days a week or 2 days a week. And so I think that if a new person is coming in, you want to really try to engage those individuals that you're now going to be supervising, acknowledging that there are different ways to do things. So I hope that helps a little bit there. Set clear parameters and maybe some memos out there about what the new expectations are or how the processes that you're implementing. Don't assume they're going to know exactly what you want them to do without giving that guidance.
Exactly.
I don't see that we have any other questions. I'm going to flip. Oh, maybe I do have another question. It's hard to
Right,
see this screen. Hold on.
Speaking more.
Supervise once in a while on a rotating basis. So, okay, so it sounds like there's some supervisors that rotate in once in a while. Then it's important, I would say, that that supervisor who's covering is familiar with the processes and the procedures of the other supervisor. And that's that dialogue, the interdepartmental dialogue that you have. So you're not walking in and upsetting the apple cart on it, even if it's unintentional. So if you know you're going to be tasking someone for coverage, like I might cover certain things, like there are certain types of hearings, I might cover them at times, but I'm in touch with the person who runs those hearings to make sure I'm up to date on what I need to do, right? So I think that could be helpful.
That's really a question of due diligence and communication. If you know you're going to take over for someone else, whether it's on a short-term or long-term basis, maybe they're not available because they went out on leave, but you want to do your due diligence beforehand. How does the job get done? How did that supervisor get things done? So you know what the landscape was like for the employees working in that unit or department beforehand. And then, as Marianne points out, you can ask for their input informationally to come up with your own game plan, but you want to communicate and let everybody know that you're listening to the feedback that you're getting from people at all levels. Right.
Well, it's been a pleasure to be here today. Like Andrew said, the slide should be posted by tomorrow. We're available if anybody needs any questions, whether on this topic or another employment related topic. We're happy to assist. We're here for you.
Or if there are topics that any of you have in mind that you would like us to conduct, then send us a short email and let us know. Can you, or do you plan on covering X topic? And we'll clearly take that into consideration and putting together the next series that we're working on now.
We could also put you in the hands of the right people in our office, even if the topic is not employment related, but you're encountering an issue within the work site. We're happy to assist.
Absolutely.
But our pleasure to be here today, and we look forward to the next program.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great day.
Have a great day.